So hey guys, Mr. Winfield and Sylvia Winfield first appeared in Season 1's Homer's Odyssey, the third episode of Season 1. Their last appearance was in Season 7's Lisa the Iconoclast. They are a retired elderly couple who live on Evergreen Terrace. Well, maybe semi-retired, but we'll get into that in a bit. Sometimes they live next door to the Simpsons, sometimes they live down the street, and even sometimes they live across the road. But one thing is for sure, they were neighbours to the Simpsons, and they really didn't like them that much. In New Kid on the Block, they moved to Florida, after selling their house to Ruth Powers. Sylvia is voiced by Tracy Ullman in Bart's Dog Gets an F, but in the remaining of her appearances, she is voiced by Maggie Roswell. Mr. Winfield is voiced by Dan Castellaneta, that's the dude who voices Homer. But why were this grouchy couple forgotten by the writers? Why were they written out of the show? We'll explore all of this shortly, but let's first look at all of their appearances in the television series. As stated, Mr. and Mrs. Winfield are first seen in Season 1's Homer's Odyssey. They are both sat on their porch at night watching Homer carry a huge boulder. Sylvia gleefully comments that Simpson looks like he's gonna kill himself, but Mr. Winfield shuts her down, telling her he might just be taking his boulder for a walk. They laugh joyfully at that discussion as Homer walks away. I think we get to know a lot about these two just from this scene alone. They clearly have no care for Homer at all. I think this is their most amusing scene, kind of funny how uncaring they are about Homer potentially trying to commit suicide. They are shown again in Season 1 in The Telltale Head. Like many other Springfielders, they join a crowd and chase both Homer and Bart, and I really bet that they were happy to do so. In the following episode, Life on the Fast Lane, they are both seen at the Singing Sirloin, presumably for their anniversary. The waiters sing to them as they hold hands. Aww. When Season 2 came along, both Mr. and Mrs. Winfield were added to the opening title sequence, as you can see here. Sitting as usual, not exactly on the porch, but close, I guess. In Simpsons and Delilah, they are seen yet again sitting on their porch. Homer runs past with his new hair, saying good morning to both of them. Mr. Winfield calls out angrily, "Get a haircut, you hippie." Believe it or not, but this is their last appearance of them on their porch. It's kind of weird because it became their thing, but the writers just stopped doing it and stopped using them on their porch. Weird. This is also the last time we hear Mr. Winfield speak. These first appearances are pretty straightforward overall. It's just about getting humour from these two, showing how uncaring they are and how they really don't care for the Simpsons. I think we may get an explanation as to why the Winfields, or at least Sylvia, do not like Homer. In War of the Simpsons, Marge mentions that the last time Homer got drunk, he threw up at the Winfields' party in their laundry hamper. Maybe this is the real reason why Mrs. Winfield was giddy to see that Homer might be killing himself. I would say that the next 3 or possibly 5 appearances are really just the Winfields being used to fill up crowds. I think this is meant to be Mr. Winfield here, selling souvenirs in Season 2's Dancing Homer, but it might not be him considering he is meant to be retired. Maybe it's just a look-alike. There's another possible appearance here of Sylvia. I don't know, I think it's more just Sylvia's head shape, but not actually her. Anyway, one thing is for sure, that they do both appear at the end of Dancing Homer in the Capital City Stadium. Maybe they're just big baseball fans. I mean, they travelled all the way to Capital City just to see this game. Guess they weren't too happy though to see that Homer was dancing there. It would have been really cool if the writers actually tied in a joke here with them being disgusted with Homer being the essential mascot. We see Sylvia Winfield in the library in Dead Putting Society. Here we see that she has friends outside of her husband, and she's actually quite friendly to Lisa, saying hi to her. Clearly Mrs. Winfield doesn't hate all of the Simpsons. We later see Mr. and Mrs. Winfield cheering on Ned and Homer as they mow the lawn in their wives' dresses. Nothing much to say here apart from, wow, look at Mr. Winfield's pants. This is actually the last time we see Mr. Winfield until their last appearance in Lisa the Iconoclast. We see Mrs. Winfield on her own in the DMV in Principal Charming, waiting in the long line. The next few Sylvia appearances ramp up this begrudging neighbour stereotype. In Bart's Dog Gets an F, Sylvia calls up Homer complaining about Santa's little helper in her pool. We get this back and forth with her and Homer. He calls her a liar until he finds out that Sylvia is telling the truth. This appearance of Sylvia is actually voiced by Tracy Ullman, but it's nothing too surprising considering she also voices Emily Winthrop in the same episode. In Stark Raving Dad, they reused the footage of Sylvia on the phone to Homer, in the segment where the town are discussing Michael Jackson coming to town. They also used the babysitter agency receptionist here too, but I feel like Sylvia wouldn't really care if Michael Jackson was coming to town. Feels more like the animators are just being a tad lazy and reusing footage of characters on the phone. In separate locations, we see Sylvia peering out of the window at Bart hanging with Lou and Eddie. She joyfully says to herself, "Well, it's about time." Clearly she doesn't like Homer, Santa's little helper, or Bart. And then, in New Kid on the Block, we get our final speaking appearance from Sylvia. She visits Homer and informs him that she and her husband are selling their house and moving to Florida. She demands that he stops being pantsless in front of the window, that he takes in his old Halloween jack-o'-lanterns, and cover the garbage, as is attracting moose. Homer shouts at the moose, who attacks Homer. He darts inside and Sylvia seems horrified. Mr. and Mrs. Winfield leave their hangers and old medicine, which Homer takes. Bart tells a fake tale of the Winfields' mutated son, and Lisa tells Bart they didn't have one. It seems like this couple didn't have any children, actually. The Winfields then sell their house to Ruth Powers, and presumably they move to Florida. We get one last appearance from these two 3 seasons later in Season 7's Lisa the Iconoclast. They are seen in the crowd cheering the parade. Maybe they visited some of their old friends, or maybe they're just proud Springfielders and they wanted to celebrate Jebediah Springfield. Or maybe the animators forgot they moved away. Who knows? This is their last ever appearance. We have not seen them since. Well, that's not 100% true. They actually stayed in the opening sequence all the way up till season 20. But in the show's narrative, this is their last appearance. So why were they forgotten? Why were they so easily written out of the show? Why weren't they in the Simpsons movie? Let's pull the crayons out of our brains and think a little. So like I said, these two have really been forgotten. They didn't even get a cameo in the movie. One could easily say that the reason that these two were forgotten is because they were written out of the narrative. They moved to Florida and therefore it would ruin continuity if they made more appearances. But it's not like The Simpsons care that deeply about continuity. And I mean, we don't have to look far to see examples of this. In fact, we can just use the Winfields. As stated, the Winfields have lived next door, across the street, and down the street, so maybe they could have sold their house, moved to Florida, and then moved right back to Springfield a season or 2 later. We can also rule out the voice actors being an issue, as Maggie Roswell didn't have a pay dispute until much later on, and Dan Castellaneta has been there, forever. Personally, I think the more likely reason as to why they have been forgotten was the writers just didn't see a need to bring them back. The neighbour stuff is mostly covered by Flanders, and sure, you could argue they need that begrudging neighbour, but I think the begrudging nature of Sylvia is replicated quite well by Helen Lovejoy, and Helen Lovejoy herself is not exactly a popular character. Helen has that judgmental nature to her after all. As for characters who despise Homer, well, I think Patty and Selma cover that ground pretty damn well. As for Mr. Winfield, well, Grandpa can do any of his potential jokes, or hell, even like the old Jewish man or Jasper. Homer mentions that the Winfields have moved to run out the clock, implying one of them or both of them is going to die soon. So maybe this was the reason. It's sad to think about it, but maybe one of them died and the other stayed in Florida. Sure, they did come back for that one episode, but maybe it happened after that. I like both of these characters overall, especially Sylvia. You could argue she's a little bit of a busybody, but I mean, Homer did throw up at her party. His dog was in her pool, and maybe she has more good reasons to hate him. We don't know the full picture. It's a shame that these two haven't been seen in so long, and it's possible that one day they could return. Both the voice actors are still present on the show after all. But what's unique about the Winfields is it's just been so damn long since we've seen them. It's crazy how many seasons have passed. And like I said, it's not like they would need to even recast to bring them back. So I think I've answered the question for the most part as why the Winfields have been forgotten. I think it's a mix of two reasons. The first reason being that there's just characters who deliver their jokes way better, and the second reason is they were written out of the show. Now I know that normally the Simpsons do not stick with continuity, but we do know that they have done it in the past. Mod's death, for example. So I think it is entirely possible that that is a reason. Thanks for watching as always. I really hope you enjoyed learning about these Simpsons neighbours. I've decided that next episode I want to talk about a character with eyebrows. So tell me your thoughts on the Winfields, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, goodbye.